Perhaps the greatest danger posed by the biotech agenda is its power to intensify racial injustice in America. Not only are human biotechnologies employed within a racist social order, but they're already reinforcing the myth that race is a genetic trait and impeding efforts to tackle the social causes of racial inequality. Remember, justifying racial inequities in biological terms rather than in terms of white political privilege has profoundly shaped science in America for 3 centuries, beginning with the scientific defense of slavery. This basic explanation of racial difference rooted in biology rather than in power still operates today. In fact, it's making a spectacular comeback, and it threatens to shape every aspect of the biotechnological future. I want to focus on 2 examples of how racism operates within the biotech agenda in ways that are antithetical to progressive and feminist values, and that's repro-genetic technologies and race-based pharmaceuticals. Reproductive technologies like in vitro fertilization now come along with new advances like pre-implantation diagnosis and sperm sorting that allows for sex selection. So they now assist people not only to have children who are genetically related to them, that was always the purpose of in vitro fertilization, but now also children who are genetically advantaged. Reprogenetics intensifies a dual system of reproduction in which primarily privileged whites benefit from technologies enabling them to have children, and the children that they want, while minority and immigrant women are the primary subjects of welfare reform and other measures aimed at limiting their childbearing. The public begrudges welfare mothers a meager increase in benefits for 1 more child, but celebrates the birth of high-tech sextuplets that require a fortune in publicly funded hospital care. Poor and minority women have little access to reprogenetic technologies, and think about the images that promote these technologies, or even the image that might come to your mind when you think about that perfect baby that they're supposed to create. They are almost always of white people. The answer isn't to expand their use to more people. First, it's very unlikely that in an era of welfare reform and cutbacks, there'll be much political support for state subsidies for reprogenetics. I mean, could you imagine legislators that have just passed laws imposing so-called family caps on welfare benefits that are explicitly aimed at deterring welfare recipients from having any more children, then turning around and supporting proposals that would pay for access to expensive high-tech reprogenetic procedures. I mean, just imagine paying for a woman on welfare to produce many embryos. You know, just, right, doesn't work. Not in today's political climate. But more fundamentally, the unchecked expansion of reprogenetics is anti-progressive. It inscribes the perceived social advantage of having or not having certain abilities or traits associated with genes. Selecting children's abilities, sex, or race reflects a social advantage or disadvantage connected to these categories and can reinforce an unjust value system that privileges some over others. What's more, market-driven increases in reprogenetics without regulation can restrict freedom, not necessarily increase it. It's simply untrue that just because something is more technologically advanced, it's more liberating. Market-driven sickle cell screening, for example, in the 1970s served the discriminatory ends of insurance companies and employers rather than the black people who carried the trait or had the disease. There's also some concern that minority women's eggs that aren't desirable to most white couples for reproductive purposes, where race matters a lot, will be purchased on the cheap for stem cell research, where race won't matter that much. But it's a mistake to think that these technologies are inherently liberating even for the privileged women who can afford them. Reprogenetics has generated greater surveillance of women, who are the ones primarily responsible for making the right genetic decisions. Genetic screening programs, even if they're supposed to be voluntary, can put a lot of pressure on women to act on the results. Communities expect that parents, especially mothers, will produce perfect babies for the sake of the whole. It's increasingly routine for pregnant women to get prenatal diagnoses for certain genetic conditions, such as Down syndrome. It's just expected. And what do? You're expected to act then on the results you get. Even premarital genetic testing has now become a duty, not a choice, in some communities. The reprogenetics industry is a form of privatization, the hallmark of the neoliberal state, that makes the individual the site of surveillance through a subtly compelled self-regulation of genetic risk. Moreover, placing the responsibility for ending health disparities on individual reproductive decisions reduces a sense of societal obligation to address systemic inequities. Many disability rights activists argue that genetic testing privatizes disability because the availability of prenatal diagnosis for a disorder may discourage government funding for research and social services for people who have the disorder. The reliance on reprogenetics to fix disability and disease goes hand in hand with the demise of the welfare state and with support for other private remedies for poverty. The proliferation of new genetic technologies is inversely related to access to general health care. Now, some argue that it's a matter of reproductive choice for women to be able to select the traits of their children, including sex and other qualities unrelated to health. They dismiss concerns about the implications for women, the disabled, and racial minorities as threats to reproductive freedom. But if we insist on social justice as the heart of reproductive freedom activism, we won't let eugenics infiltrate the women's reproductive rights movement as it did in the 1920s and 30s, and which we are still suffering from and still trying to get from under to this day.